Thank you everyone for the wonderful day here and joining with Jason Hachelin, who is head of platform of Slack. So Jason, before you got here, Pizza Hut ordered pizzas. So what are you going to order? You're going to order beer. There's a lot of beer in the beer garden for us afterwards.
Nice. Look forward to that.
And so today, the topic of the talk is ambitious bots for business. And Slack is, probably in the show of hands, everyone on Slack probably, yes, of course, absolutely. 77 of the Fortune 100 companies use Slack. There's 3 million daily active users spending 2 hours per workday involved with Slack. And I think we talked beforehand, and something that I took away from my conversation with Jason was that Slack really wants to be the place where people do work. And in June, the company launched buttons. And I wanted to start by asking you to please tell us a little bit about what buttons are, how they work, and what's the difference between a button and an app or a bot. How do you think about that?
Sure. So in June, we released something we're calling message buttons. And backing up a step, thinking about Slack, and the way that people are working with Slack, our mission is to make your work life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And in thinking through that, a lot of times there have been so many wonderful bots and apps that are created for Slack, but many of them are lacking like a little bit of user experience help, right? Like we thought through like what would a message look like if it had a little bit more to help you complete the task. And so we talked to a number of our partners about what would this look like if we actually gave developers the capability to program buttons from within Slack. And we launched with 12 partners who had
and you're dealing with sort of roughly 500 potential partners, the size of the app
directory?
directory?
Well, right now, so our app directory launched back in December, and at that time, we had taken this idea of integrating with third-party software and turned it into an entire app directory on Slack. And at the time of launch, we had about 150 apps that had been created. Right now, we're up to about 500 apps that are in our app directory right now. We have more being submitted every day. Some of you, I'm sure in the crowd, have apps already listed on our directory or have submitted recently. So we had a good group of folks to go to and talk to them about, would this be useful to you? How could you possibly use that? And this kind of was a little bit kicked off internally because we had a tool called Lunch Train.
Yes.
So Lunch Train, inevitably at Slack, as I'm sure at your company, you probably have some food trucks that are nearby, and you want to know when are you free? Should we go? Where should we meet? And so as a proof of concept, we started this thing called Lunch Train that allowed you to type a / command on Slack to start a lunch train. And then a button would come up and said, would you like to start this train? Yes. And it would add that to whatever channel on Slack you were in. And if you wanted to join the lunch train, it would ask you, hey, would you like to board? You click the button, and it would notify you 5 minutes before, hey, please meet at the elevators. We're all going to get,
It's a walking school bus, but to the nearby restaurant.
Yeah.
Right?
So, but we built it as a proof of concept to see would this be useful, and we've been using it internally on our own projects. We've been using it for new features we've launched, and our partners have been really happy
So
with it.
when you were, let's talk about it for just spend a moment on that. So you have this, proof of concept lunch train. You discover that a little bit of tweaking of the UI, overall better experience. And so when you were launching the buttons, the initial 12 partners who include Trello, Kayak, Greenhouse, did they look at Lunch Train and huzzah, the lights went on, the bulb flashed?
We talked to them about that. We have a very close relationship with our development community. They would provide feedback to us, and we were able to incorporate that, make it simpler, easier. But we actually, in the case of Trello, we had such a tight integration with them that we actually sent an engineer to New York to work with them, sit in their office, and kind of work through some of the new things that they were working on for their app. So in that case, we took a lot of their feedback and built that right back into the product. So I'd say we have a very, very close and symbiotic relationship with our partners.
Can you maybe describe, for instance, the use case of Greenhouse? So how it's used within Slack, so people might better grasp what we're describing.
So for any of the apps in the app directory, you can go to slack.com/apps to see any number of these. The ones that are labeled all buttoned up are the ones that have obviously message buttons turned on. In the case of Greenhouse, you can add the Greenhouse app to Slack. Greenhouse is an app that allows you to accept resumes and helps you deal with the interview process. In the case of Greenhouse, the way it would work previously is it would post, say a new applicant came in, it would post into your hiring channel, and if you wanted to view that or like approve to the next step, you would have to click a link in the message, and then you would leave Slack, go to Greenhouse, and deal with that there. Now, from within Slack, you can just hit a button and say, like, approve. I want that to happen. Then you don't need to leave Slack. And Greenhouse is happy because things are flowing through their system, and people on Slack are happy because they're using Slack as that unified interface for all work.
Yeah, and it sort of ties in. Earlier this morning, Chris Messina showed a slide of a tree ring, and he started with the web, and then apps, and then bots of going out in concentric circles. And I think this is bringing the data closer to the end user, pushing it out to the proverbial edge in some ways.
Right, and I think the other thing there too is that when we say apps as opposed to bots can be listeners and things that go out and run jobs and come back and do things for you. But the apps are becoming more and more full-featured. And I think when we think about what's next for Slack, we think about making your life simpler, more productive. What other bits of user experience can we add to Slack that would make your life easier? So message buttons is really just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg.
And how do you work through, so thinking of, you had initially 12 partners, another 13th, and I know there's a queue of other buttons coming. In some ways, Slack becomes the interface to Greenhouse or to Trello or to Kayak in some ways. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but so how do you wrestle with that, or how do the two companies sort that out? Is there?
I think it's all about kind of. If you're a user, you're sitting in a company, what do you want to have happen in terms of thinking through the business considerations, which is what I think you're thinking through. We're constantly listening. There are folks who talk to us every day about how they envision their app working, and we can provide better guidelines of like how would that work? How should you better work with folks? But it sounds like I think that's a win-win if people are spending more time actually getting work completed instead of zipping around to a bunch of different places.
Mm-hmm. And where do where do you see the buttons going next? So either sort of office productivity, but what are other potential uses?
Well, I think it's probably important to remember that Slack really does think about making your life at work more pleasant and simple. We're not thinking about some of the social use cases and things like that. We're definitely thinking about helping you have a better time, and in that way, Slack is very playful and fun, and has the adoption that we've seen oftentimes comes from this does feel like a better way to work.
Mm-hmm. And thinking though, when I was looking at, there's a video that they've created, and we'll post it later. But approving expense reports, certainly there's a medical or health, things that could be happening, or surprising applications that.
Yeah, sure. I think in the way that we see the message buttons being used, there are all sorts of different use cases for healthcare, construction. I know project management touches my world quite a bit, so that's the one that I care a lot about. With Trello, you can join a board, you can follow a project right there, the message that gets posted in there. So I think we think about delivering more and more capabilities that allow you to interact with deeper and deeper pieces of the software.
Right. So I know you love all your children equally, but what's your favorite button or your favorite app?
My favorite one.
And why?
Well, I mean, Lunch Train.
Lunch
really.
Train.
I do love lunch. But I'd say that the ones that I love are the ones where I see actual work being completed. There was one recently that I've used it on small teams and large teams, and I love seeing the GitHub integration. I love seeing some important bug being marked done. Recently, I know there was a Trello card that was moved from the considering pile to actually being worked on, and that kicked off maybe like a 40-message thread about a designer who was super excited that we were actually going to get the chance to launch this feature, and there was a very hearty discussion that happened there. And to me, there's a lot of excitement about bots, there's a lot of excitement about apps, but when you think about the power, it's not, hey, you can say something to a bot and it's going to do something remarkable. It's that it coexists. It's bringing enterprise software, it's bringing all this software together into a spot that is very human.
And so just I think sort of a final question, thinking about, the title is Bots for Business, and certainly you think about Facebook Messenger, 11,000 bots, 900, so on and so on. But in some ways, those are one-to-one bots, and what you're building is an ecosystem around yourself, but also really emphasizing collaboration. Your company very publicly put up the product roadmap. Congratulations for that, openness and so on, Trello board. But so what do you see then as the chief distinction between sort of, I'll say, Slack's approach and a consumer-facing bot, or Facebook bots, Messenger bots?
Well, I think we really do have that user-centered approach of thinking about what do people want, but that is in the context of a team. Mm-hmm. So I know we've been talking a lot about work, but a team in that very general sense. So that means that this needs to work for a group of people. Slack has channels, we have direct messages, but I believe that teams accomplish things together. And so finding a way for people to build wonderful apps or connect their software to these teams, Slack seems like the natural place for that to happen.
Great. Well, we are out of time. And I want to thank Jason and thank our audience. Thank you.